Hello and welcome to the Haxton Knits channel. If you don't know me, my name's Deanna and I am a master knitter living in Okinawa, Japan. This is the Haxton Knits channel and I talk almost exclusively about all the knitty things in my life, as well as little snippets of life here on the tropical island of Okinawa, Japan. This week we have just kind of a quick check-in episode. I don't have a lot of content for you today. I do have cats in the room this week. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's on my needles, my works in progress, and some exciting news for the next couple of weeks. Let's get started. The cat is going to help all episode, I think. So as expected, something has happened. This is an event true as any holiday in my life. It is the summer knitting slump. That's right, it just happens every single year. The weather gets hot and my mojo for knitting goes way down. And I can tell because I don't want to cast anything new on, and the projects I have on my needles are just kind of languishing and hanging around for longer than I would normally expect them to hang on. So let's just do a quick recap of what's on the needles, because I know I've been putting out some different content over the last couple of weeks. So here we have, number one. This project, guys, I thought was going to be on and off my needles so fast, and I was wrong. So this is a small portion of the Waiting for Rain pattern by Sylvia McFadden. This yarn is of course a Woolen Vine yarn. You know I love the Woolen Vine yarn. So my pink yarn here, the contrast color, let's see what I can show you, is on Woolen Vine's Nouveau base, and the color is Fairy Hair. Nouveau is a single. And then this sort of white gray main color, as I'm calling it, is the Solstice colorway, and I have it on Woolen Vine's Volca base, which is a cashmere, merino cashmere blend. And if you don't know Woolen Vine yarn, Kristen is a very popular YouTuber and has her own hand-dyed yarn shop, I think out of New York, somewhere in New York. And her yarn is just lovely, and it's all dyed beautifully, and I just love her aesthetic. And this particular pattern, I knew as soon as I bought the yarn, this was what I wanted to knit with it, but I am having some problems. So if you have never seen this particular pattern, the actual pattern itself is meant to be knit in one solid color, and it has these short row lace panels knit into it, and then a kind of plain bind off. But when you purchase the pattern, it comes with this extra PDF with like tips and tricks and hacks and ways you can change this pattern, including how to do your short row lace in a different color than the main body, and this kind of interesting picot lace bind off. And this is where my problems have started. So in an effort to use every single scrap of this yarn that I possibly could, I attempted to basically knit until I ran out of my pink yarn, and then use what was left of the white yarn to bind off. But I did not have nearly enough. So I had like knit all the way to the end of the pink yarn, started my bind off, realized I didn't have enough. And so I said, okay, no problem. I'm going to go back, I'm going to pull out another 2 rows of the white yarn. So I'll have to pull out all the pink, pull out 2 rows of the white yarn, reknit all the pink, and then bind off again. Did all that, was still short. I didn't think I was that short, but I was short. And at that point, I didn't want to bind off, like pull out all of the pink rows again to pull out more of the white yarn and then reknit. Oh, I see a problem happening here. Say hello, this is Stoli. You gonna be good? No, you're not gonna be good? So long story short, I pulled out 4 rows of pink knitting, knit until I ran out of my white yarn, and then thought surely 4 rows of knitting are going to be enough for this bind off. I was so close with the white yarn, but I'm afraid it might not be. So this bind off, if you are working on this project, it eats up a lot of yarn. I would say maybe 6 rows worth of yarn. You know, when you get to the end of a long shawl, how much yarn it eats up. So I actually have like this much left to be bound off, and I'm a little bit nervous about what's going to happen there. And so as a result, this guy's just been kind of sitting in timeout. He's just been sitting in my project bag waiting for me to get the mojo to pick up and decide whether I have enough yarn left to bind off or not. But I'm not in a rush, so alas, this will happen when it happens. We shall see. In the like 3 seconds I was talking about this, my cat managed to get completely 100% entangled in what was remaining of this particular ball of yarn. So I am very quickly winding this yarn into a center pull ball while fighting with my cat. Yeah, so I definitely, look, this is all the yarn I have left. There's no way that's enough. Did you eat my yarn? Rude. Rude. Okay, so that is Waiting for Rain in Vine. It's a beautiful crescent lace shawl. I'm actually probably going to do a video about blocking this particular project once it's actually off my needles, because it is sort of an advanced project for blocking. It contains garter stitch and lace, and these 2 particular patterns, they need to be blocked differently. So garter stitch, you're going to treat it kind of like ribbing, where you don't want to pull it too much because then you lose some of the essential great squishy quality of garter stitch, whereas lace really needs a steady block. So you need to like stiff block, you know, really pin out the lace, open up all those eyelets, make it look really pretty. And so if you try to block lace aggressively and it's surrounded by garter stitch, what's going to happen is you're going to really overstretch the garter stitch. And so definitely I plan on doing some sort of tutorial video for you guys on how to block open that lace really nicely without overstretching your garter stitch. So that'll be coming up in a future video. If I ever bind off, we shall see. What's new? I do have a new kind of object. So some of my commenters have mentioned that I don't knit with a lot of Japanese yarns despite living in Japan. And I think it's just because I have so many favorite yarns coming out of the US that I tend to gravitate towards them. They're what I'm familiar with and what I know. But I do love yarn in general. I'm not biased for Japan yarn or US yarn. And when I was yarn shopping in my local community, I found some gorgeous yarn this week. Could not resist picking it up. This yarn it's called Daruma. Let's see if you guys can see that label. So this came from a local craft store called Pandora House, which is a chain of craft stores. They could do a lot of fabric and sewing stuff, but also yarn. There's probably 3 within maybe like a 5-block radius of myself. So there's a lot of them around. And sometimes I don't love the yarn there, mostly because they sell it in these like teeny tiny little itty bitty skeins, and so whenever I want to knit something for myself I have to buy like armloads of them, and I always feel kind of funny with my basket with armloads and armloads of yarn. But this particular yarn, it's called Airy wool alpaca, and it's a 80% wool, 20% alpaca, and it specifies baby alpaca. And I saw this. I wish I could have shown you these before I like kind of broke into them and made the skeins look not so nice, because the colors just kind of called to me. They're nothing really special, but I saw these all lined up on the shelf together and just, I don't know, they wanted to be something. So I actually have 2 skeins of this dark charcoaly gray, 1 skein of the light gray, 1 skein of this creamy white, and 1 skein of this beautiful sort of gray dusty blue. and I keep squishing it because it's super soft and looking at it and dreaming and trying to figure out what I want to make with it. And I finally just decided I wanted some really simple, really sweet color work, and something not too challenging because the summer slump, my brain's not there. So I have actually just started to cast on. This is probably going to be a cowl, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit it in the round and make a really long tube and then graft that tube together so it ends up being sort of a double thickness cowl that goes this way instead of this way. I hope that makes sense. If you've ever knit the Rove pattern, R-O-V-E, it's a beautiful slip stitch cowl that I knit previously out of Block Island fibers. That's a similar pattern. That's kind of where I drew my inspiration. For the stitch pattern, I am drawing inspiration from a pattern that has been in my Ravelry favorites for a while, and that is the Yoki Doki dress. It's kind of a tunic length shirt or dress. It's by Gudrun Johnston, and I just think it's beautiful, sort of sweet color work. There are some definite nods to the Fair Isle traditional OXO patterns, and I thought this would be kind of a fun way to play with those stitch patterns. So hopefully you'll see a little bit more of this project in the future weeks. Again, no pattern per se, I'm just sort of running with it. Next, I have my sort of sad update. Here you go. Here is a kilogram of alpaca yarn. This is Gist yarn in their alpaca base, and the colorway is Cloud. You guys have probably heard my tale of woe. I initially bought this yarn to do a weaving project and discovered that alpaca yarn might not be the most beginner-friendly fiber to use when weaving, because I was just fighting constantly and getting tangled, and alas, it makes great knitting yarn. So you all know I am working on my Orenburg lace shawl. This is one side. The progress has been sad. So here we are. I think the last time I saw you is when I did this progress marker right here. So there has not been a lot of progress. This is the second side. I still have 2 more and the whole body of this project to go. It will get done. It will get done. It will get done. The problem is that it just requires full brain power at my computer with like the chart. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. I have some traveling in the coming weeks, and I keep thinking I want to take this with me, but I'm going to have to figure out how to travel with a sort of hard to follow chart. And I know I've heard a lot of people talk about highlighter tape. So like getting highlighter tape and putting it on a printed pattern. I have actually searched really hard to find it here on island and wasn't successful, but maybe I'll try again for the sake of travel knitting. If you don't know this pattern, this is the Orenburg Worm Shawl. I started on this after taking the class, the Orenburg Worm Shawl, available over on Interweave Knits. And if you are interested in a little bit of history, talking about the yarn coming out of Orenburg, Russia, and the cottage industry of knitting worm shawls, you should definitely go check out that class. It's a huge project, and I am hopeful that one day it will be finished. Doesn't that look nice though? Look at that. It looks nice when you hold it up. I can't wait to block this because I know it is going to be giant. All right, last but not least, this is not actually a cast on yet. This is just some balls of knit picks. I've got some exciting content for you this week. So I have quite a bit of leftover yarn from my great tapestry that I talked about on my previous episode. And there is a particular pattern that I have always wanted to knit. I admit that I am a little bit obsessed with the idea of knitted pants. So the pattern I've been thinking about, it's called Fair Isle Pants by Emily Ringelmann. And there are a couple of patterns, a couple of projects on Ravelry that I have favorited, particularly this pair of sort of black, white, and gray. And there's a pair of green ones that I really, really like. And I keep thinking it's about time to cast on. I don't have quite enough of each color, but I've got lots of bits and bobs of Knit Picks palette floating around in my life, and you know, a small amount of stash yarn. I have another thing of stash yarn over here that you can't see. I actually think I have a really modest stash for a person living in a place where there aren't a lot of yarn shops. I have to sort of order everything in. That honestly, most of my stash back there is stuff that's like leftovers. I tend to order a little bit more than I need to because, you know, if I run out, I have to mail it in. I'm wandering. Anyway, so these are all leftover bits from that tapestry, and I've been thinking about knitting that pants pattern. I have knit a pair of shorts before. They're a Stephen West pattern that I sort of modified to make them more like a looser fitting pair of shorts than the kind of skin tight short shorts that the pattern looks like it's intended to be worn as. But I think this might be the year that I actually go ahead and knit myself some pants. All right, that is it for my works in progress this week. Let's move on to life in Okinawa. For life in Okinawa this week, I am going to give you a little bit of coronavirus updates. I feel like everyone's over this by now, but Japan has finally really started pushing and rolling out their vaccines. The US was ahead of the game with the vaccines, releasing the trial doses and the non-FDA approved doses. But now Japan has their vaccine approved and they are rolling it out in force. There was a phenomenal number of vaccines being given per day. I'm sorry, I wish I could remember the exact number, but I don't. I think that a lot of that push was anticipation of the Olympics, and of course, we don't know yet whether the Olympics are going to be open to foreign travelers or not, but we will know in a week or two because that's about how far out we are from the start of the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. So yeah, the local population is finally getting all of their vaccines rolled out. And that's exciting because here in Okinawa, we are still in what's called a state of emergency. The numbers are now on the downswing again, but we were getting about 250 new cases a day, which may sound small, but this is a small island. So for the prefecture of Japan, it was enough to push us into the red, into that state of emergency. And of course, that means that a lot of the restaurants and shops and stuff are closing. Pretty much everyone's closing by about 7 p.m., sort of around that time frame. A lot of the alcohol sales have been stopped completely, or at least stopping earlier in the evening, depending on where you're at. In other news, I am going to be traveling in the next couple of weeks. I'm not going to tell you where I'm going just yet. You're going to have to wait for the next video. That's really for my safety. You know, I'm not going to tell you where I'm going, so y'all can flash mob me when I get there. I know you want to meet me. But when I go traveling, I go yarn shopping. So I'm hopeful that that means that I'm going to have some fresh yarn to share with you and some new projects hopefully cast on. So stand by for that. In a couple of weeks, I will have some updates on where I've been and what yarny mischief I got into. All right, in last but not least news, we're going to talk a little bit about my test knit, my pattern. It's called Moroccan Blue, currently in testing right now. It is a tunic length top. I designed it to be worn as a top, but I suspect you could wear it as a dress or even add a little bit of extra length and wear it as a dress. This is a beautiful empire waist sleeveless top with just a smattering of stranded color work, and I knit it in Sweet Georgia yarn Tough Love sock. I am so excited. I've seen some of my test knitters progress already, and There's nothing more exciting than seeing your project in new color combinations. Like just seeing people pick out yarns and put them together in ways that I wouldn't have thought to do is always just, it's really refreshing. I actually saw one of my Hope Point tops over on Instagram, and just this beautiful, beautiful selection of colors, and it makes me totally jealous, and now I want to cast on another one. But if you are interested in test knitting that top, I will link a video up here for you to go over to find out more about the test knitting process for that particular pattern. Otherwise, you're gonna have to stand by for when the pattern releases. All right, guys. That is everything I have for you today. If you enjoyed the content of this video, please hit the like button below. And if you want to stay up to date on all of my future content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. As always, you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Haxton Knits. If you would like to know more about my Orenburg warm shawl, I recommend this video here all about Orenburg lace knitting. And for something a little bit lighter, check out this video here on an expert knitter reacting to knitting in movies. I'll see you next time, guys.